You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You're listening to The Archaeology Show. TAS goes behind the headlines to bring you the real stories about archaeology and the history around us. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello and welcome to The Archaeology Show, episode 290.
On today's show, we talk about the surprisingly accurate real history behind Moana 2.
Let's dig a little deeper before we take a long pause. Welcome to the sick show.
Sick show.
Hopefully we get all the coughing edited out.
We will. It was me last time, now it's you.
And you a little bit too.
Well, I just have this lingering cough that won't go away. It's just that kind of cold, even though it's been 3 weeks since my cold ended, but whatever.
Well, I'm going to make a gross error and miscalculation here, but we're about to go to partial lands of Moana's ancestors. Oh. Not really, but not even a little bit.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I know.
Take kidding. Everything you just said back.
I'm kidding. All I'm saying is we're going further south in the Pacific today.
Yes, we are. And that is a true statement.
And Moana's ancestors came from the South Pacific.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's all I'm saying is we're going closer to that direction because we're going to Mexico.
We are. Do you want to say why you're talking about Moana right now? In case people didn't listen to the last episode.
Let's cut that part out because we do have an introduction.
Oh, we do? Okay. Okay. Go ahead. Oh, yeah. Okay. What show is this?
So cut all this out.
What are we recording right now? Am I on one of those shows that doesn't do an intro? I think I must be.
No,
man. Okay. Well, I'm going to leave all that in probably. Right. So, yeah. Okay, cool. So we're talking about Moana.
Wow.
Oh, God. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, specifically, we're talking about Moana 2. But I think we're going to talk about the first one a little bit as well because...
Well, we're going to talk about the first one a little bit. This isn't a movie review for those of you that are ready to shut this off.
Yeah.
It is a little bit, but this is a really good reason to talk about Polynesian history because it's surprisingly when I started kind of digging into this and trying to find out, because we had to go see Moana 2 because we have nieces that are 4 and 6 and it was required.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, going to see that kind of a movie with kids that age is just the most fun in the world because they were so into it. Also, going to see that movie by yourself as a 49-year-old man is not appropriate. Well, maybe not by yourself. If you go as a couple, I think you can get away with it. But yeah, going by yourself would be weird.
Yeah. It's actually a really good Disney movie too. Good. Yeah, it's very well done. I'm not surprised. I loved the first one too. And so the second one was really great as well. And there's some really good history stuff in there. And from what we can tell, they just did a really good job, all around. So, well, we'll get into that. Yeah. I wanted to see what was true, what was not. And I wanted to dive more into Polynesian culture and history and find out what the long pause is, which they didn't really call it that in the movie. They did not call it that. Yeah. So, anyway, this whole Moana franchise takes place about 2,000 years ago. They also don't mention that. No, they don't. Yeah. It's a kid's movie. They're not really interested in placing things in time, They just don't really need to bother with that with kids, Right. But with all the artifacts and clothing and boats and things like that, the idea is this is about 2,000 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. And Moana 2 is another thing I thought was interesting. Oh, this is so cool. Because Moana 1 didn't do this, but Moana 2 was the first Disney movie released at the same time, not later on they translated or anything like that, but at the same time, this was released in Maori. Yeah. It was released in an indigenous language. Now, a lot of times they'll release them in other languages like later Spanish or something like that, but not an indigenous language. Well, in a language that is clearly super important to the people that are featured in this movie, right? So the fact that they went that extra step to release it in that language as well is really cool. And it just... that little detail shows you that the creators were really interested in respecting the Polynesian cultures that inspired these movies. So I love that. And much like a number of movies that deal with, I would say, indigenous cultures or something along those lines, they don't really represent one culture, especially when you're going back 2,000 years. Yeah. It's difficult to do that. So this represents a mix of Polynesian cultures and themes and mythologies. And after watching this movie and in the process of creating these movies too, multiple Polynesian cultures have praised these movies for their accuracy and inspiration. I think that was the right move, don't you? Yeah. Because if they had picked one culture and tried to say, okay, this movie takes place in Hawaii, it is the Hawaiian people, all of a sudden you're restricted by the actual like boundaries of that culture, right? But by bringing in this mix and just making sure to respect all of the different ones that are brought into it, it like broadens the world so that they can kind of do what they want. And like, let's be clear here, this is a fictional movie, right? Obviously, it's fiction. Like all kinds of crazy things happen with demigods and stuff like that. In the first one as well. So like this is fiction, but it's bringing to life like some of the legends and the stories, and being able to like mix them together and not call it one specific culture, I think was like really just the right move. It's so good.
Yeah. So because of that, Moana's island of Motunui doesn't exist.
Right.
That's not a word that exists. It's not an island that exists, but that island and her people are a mix of various nations in the Pacific.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, which is the whole setting for the movies, which to be honest, I kind of thought they were just with all the leis and the coconuts and stuff. I thought they were just kind of going for old Hawaii.
Well, but is that just like the American perspective though? Because when you think of those kind of cultures, like Hawaii is the first place your brain goes because it's, you know, a state in our country and we've been there, you know, but like the Polynesian culture influenced so many islands in the Pacific, not just Hawaii. You know, there, as we'll get into, there's many, many more of them. So,
well, and Hawaii is part of this whole story. Yeah, it's just not the story, and it's not the setting of the story.
It's also one of the ones that influences the overall story. Yeah.
So it's definitely set in the Pacific Ocean, though, obviously, and the islands of the South Pacific. This is the whole that's uncontested. That's definitely where this is. But all the island names that they use are fictitious. They didn't want to get into anything.
You just start offending people when you do something that is not true to their island. So that, again, right move, I think.
Right.
Especially for a kid's movie. This is not a historical representation of anything. This is a fictional kid's movie. As we mentioned, the movie takes place 2,000 years ago during a real period in Polynesian history known as the Long Pause. That's the new piece of information to us, I think. And that's what made us like excited to do a TAS episode about a kid's movie.
Western Polynesia was colonized over 3,000 years ago with people using boats, and they just start to navigate and do stuff. And Western Polynesia, by the way, does not include Hawaii.
No.
That's like Tonga and all those other places over the other side. Samoa, Fiji.
Yeah.
That's all Western Polynesia.
Right.
So they use their wayfinding techniques, which are referenced in the movies, using stars and things like that. And they got really good at it.
Like Moana like holds her hand up at some point to like measure the distance between stars or whatever. And that sounds like it's kind of a traditional technique for how they would have navigated around the seas. So very cool. The islands of Central and Eastern Polynesia, including Bora Bora, Easter Island, Tahiti, and Hawaii, were not colonized until 2,000 years later, which is a whole 1,000 years difference from when the Western Polynesian islands were populated.
And that is the Long Pause.
Yes.
Yes. And the end of the Long Pause is where the movies take place.
Right.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, right? Because in the first Moana movie, it's Moana all about leaving her island.
Yeah.
She wants to get out. She wants to explore. She wants to know what is beyond the reef, right? I feel like I know too much about this kids movie right now, but whatever. I really, really love kids movies.
Well, we mostly watched the first one. We got interrupted by a 4-year-old.
Yeah. We watched most of it, but I had seen it before too.
Yeah, but before this though.
Yeah, but it makes sense. So like there's this progression. This is a little bit of a movie review, but these two movies are so great because it's like this progression. Like in the first one, Moana just wants to leave her island and see what's beyond it. And then she goes out and she gets into the shenanigans with Maui, which we'll get into in a little bit. Then in the second movie, it becomes a bigger story. It grows. It's not just going out and getting out beyond the reef. She's done that. Yeah. Now it's about, are there people out there? Are there other islands? Are there other things to see? Right. And that's what the story is built around, which is really cool.
Yeah. And the movies create supernatural reasons for the Long Pause, which obviously aren't real.
Right.
But they have dark forces making the seas too dangerous to navigate and things like that.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of reasons in Polynesian history for the Long Pause too. They're just like, why did they do this?
Legends, we'll get into stories. Yeah.
We'll get into why historians, archaeologists, and even Polynesian historians think the Long Pause happened a little bit later. But we'll talk about that on the other side of the break. Back in a minute. Welcome back to episode 290 of the Disney Channel review show. Moana 2.
I'm sorry. It was a good movie. I really, really loved it. I don't know if we're going to talk that much about exactly what happened in it, but I did truly love it. You should go see it.
Yeah. Anyway. I mean, go watch the movie. But
yeah.
So the cool thing is that Disney, instead of just
barreling in and offending everyone.
Right.
They formed what they called the Oceanic Trust.
Love it.
Yes. And that featured multiple scholars and cultural advisors to ensure that Polynesian inspirations were both respectful and historically accurate.
Yeah.
So before they even, like, in the writing process, I think they had like a basic script from what I could glean from the sources I was reading.
Yes.
And then they had the script reviewed and dramatically altered based on what was going on in there. We'll find out some cool things that they changed.
Yeah. But like some of the details that they were probably advised by this trust to do were things like the thatched roofs of the houses over the pits that they used to cook food, right? Like that's a very specific detail that is accurate to either the cultures today or the cultures in the past or a combination of the two.
Yeah.
So that's really great. And then they also had influence, of course they had to, in their clothing and the ceremonial dress.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the most important things. And you're going to see little girls running around in Moana costumes. And she does get a new costume in this movie, which they make a really funny joke about in the movie too, where where Maui is like, oh, I didn't know we were getting an upgrade. Or do you remember when he said that? And it was so funny. Anyway, but there is a new costume for Moana in this movie. And they clearly just had all the input from people to make sure they got that right. Another
small joke that they made in the movie that I thought was funny because Moana's kind of lumped in with all the Disney princesses.
Oh, yeah.
And Moana's, and Maui says something like, hey, princess, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And she's like, still not a princess.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, a lot of people think you are.
That might be the joke of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, I died at that, and it was clearly there for the adults.
Yeah.
But the kids are going to laugh at it, too, because it's funny. So,
the smaller kids are going to be like, wait, she's not a princess?
Well, maybe they'll learn that she's not a princess, but she's still freaking badass. So, yeah.
And, the big historical archaeological reason for that is, well, they didn't really have a princess concept.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like she was leading the tribe at that point.
Yeah.
But she basically inherited that from her father, but they didn't call it like princess.
She was not even leading the tribe really. She was like a wayfarer, right? Like she was a navigator. She
became that during this movie.
Well, but anyway, I mean, she was one of the people in the community.
She was like an elder.
Yeah.
Well, she wasn't even an elder.
Not an elder, but like
an elder.
She's meant to be some sort of leader. Yeah.
The Oceanic Trust also advised them on how they handled coconuts and Samoan-inspired tattoos and things like that.
Like how they actually held the coconuts, like how they
just handled them to begin with.
Okay, how they okay, cool.
Because coconuts are a huge part of society there. Because you can do so much stuff with coconuts.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I mean, that.
If you've ever seen Gilligan's Island, you would know that coconuts you can make a radio out of coconuts.
You can
do all kinds of things.
I usually see your references coming from a mile away, but like I definitely did not know Gilligan's Island was going to be.
I think the Oceanic Trust had influences over Gilligan's Island too. They were like, listen, guys.
Yeah, no, I don't.
So many things you can do with coconuts.
I don't think they did.
Just because you're marooned on this island doesn't mean you can't,
Anyway, moving on from that.
They advised on other changes as well. And one of those was that in the movie, originally Maui was supposed to be bald. But they were like, there's no way this demigod guy would be bald. The source of a demigod's power is his hair.
In real mythology.
In real Polynesian mythology.
Yeah.
And Maui was a real demigod in Polynesian mythology. And they're like, he's going to have long hair.
Yeah. He can't be bald.
I think they wanted him to be bald because they knew The Rock was playing him.
Yeah.
They try to make characters similar-ish to the people who are voicing them.
Right.
So you see, because whose the voice is.
Yeah.
He's got such a recognizable voice.
Yeah.
It's like why Zazu in Lion King looks a little bit like John Oliver.
Yeah, I remember watching a whole documentary on that. They sort of do it on purpose,
right?
But they almost don't do it on purpose too, because the person that's doing the voice starts influencing the way the characters are drawn to some extent too.
Sure.
So which is really cool and just like a really cool creative process. But in this case, it was a really good move for them to make sure that he had hair, because that's true to the actual Polynesian gods. So
But I have to say, his hair didn't seem that long, though. They gave him almost shorter, wiry, curly hair.
Super curly, but a little longer than shoulder length, maybe. But
The Fijian-style boats were also from ancient history of the South Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty cool. There's a lot of boat stuff in this, actually.
Lots, yeah.
If you look at this, it's actually, and I'm going to say this now, and it might be in our notes later, I just can't remember, but the boats are huge, because before the long pause, the boats were like these canoes, basically, with
smaller,
connected.
Yeah.
They were two canoes connected by a line, like wood in the middle,
right,
with a sail.
Yeah,
but they were not really for they would go long distances on these things, but they weren't like super long
like
haul
10-day passage.
Yeah,
kind of.
they weren't like, they would do that kind of stuff, but they weren't really made for that kind of thing. And then after the long pause, you see these like dramatically bigger boats, and they show that between the first Moana movie and the second Moana movie.
They do.
You see, and it's not like they say 1,000 years has passed or anything, but you just see the big difference in boat technology in the second Moana movie. And that's why they bring in this like boat engineer too, the second Moana movie.
Yeah, then the actual character.
Yeah, the character. Yeah.
And she is like a tinkerer or an inventor, right? She's just constantly trying to invent things. And like, you know, there's some of the things that she invents that maybe are like not historically accurate, like kite sailing, but
yeah.
But you know what? It's a kid's movie. So like, let's give them the space to go crazy like that.
Right.
Because as movie directors love to say, and I think that the Gladiator guy said this too, is, well, we don't have any evidence that they didn't do this. So
yeah, I didn't see anything about the whole kite sailing thing, which is kind of at the end of the movie, but
it is.
I mean, who knows, you know?
I mean, I think probably they didn't do it, but we can.
You've got ropes, you break a mast and your sail's still good. Why not just get it in the air?
See, I mean, it is possible.
So some more info on Maui. Like I said, he was a real demigod in Polynesian mythology and is credited with actually creating the Hawaiian Islands. And he pulled them up with his fish hook.
I love that mythology, that story. It is so, that's so fun. I love it.
He said to have stolen fire from the underworld and given it to the people, captured the sun to make days longer. If you've heard the song.
Yeah. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
It's all the things. Like that's the song of Maui.
Yeah.
Yeah. The real demigod,
so
the real mythological demigod.
Okay. Can we like digress for just a second and talk about the songs? One thing I'll say, my one criticism of this movie is I don't think the songs are as good as the first movie. And that I think is in part because Lin-Manuel Miranda of Hamilton, first Moana, In the Heights, Encanto, all of those movies he did that music for, but he did not do the music for this one. And I think it does show.
He didn't? I thought he did.
No, he didn't do the music. He's doing the music for Lion King 2, or no, the Lion King
it's Lion
prequel.
King 2.
It's prequel.
Yeah.
And he didn't have time to do both movies is what people are saying. But
Was that
anyway.
Lion King 0?
It's called Mufasa.
So apart from In the Heights, Hamilton, Moana,
Encanto.
What else has Lin-Manuel Miranda given us?
Encanto. No, he did do the music. And I don't know, they just didn't have the same punch that the first songs did.
Yeah.
So those songs are just iconic. You're Welcome. Into the Unknown, I think, is the other big one that Moana. So anyway, it's okay. The songs are still great. They're just not as good. One criticism.
Well, some more Polynesian mythology and history, which I love this because these are the only real names they used in the show were the demigods.
The demigods,
Yeah, and the gods.
Yeah.
The goddess Tefiti had the power to create life, which she used to create the islands of Polynesia, and her darker half, Te Ka, a lava monster who emerged when Maui stole her heart.
Yeah.
And this heart was called the Pounamu stone, and that was in the first movie.
In the first movie,
Yep.
yeah.
The stealing of the stone resulted in a blight starting to threaten islands like Motunui, the fictional island of Motunui. But all that was part of real Polynesian mythology.
Yeah, I love that they brought that real story in. Isn't Polynesian mythology just so like vibrant and interesting too?
Yeah, it's really cool.
The stories are just so, I love hearing them and I love seeing them on screen like this. So in Moana 2, her island nation of Motunui, they are not alone in the vast expanse of the ocean.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of know that they're not alone, or at least Moana thinks that they're not alone, because one of the opening scenes is her exploring out beyond the reef, and she goes to an island and she's poking around on the island just looking for evidence of anything, and they find a ceramic vessel piece. And that to her says other people.
Yeah.
Because she knows it's not from her culture. It's from somebody else. And so she's like, okay, other people. We got to figure out where these other people, and we've got to find them.
Well, and she happens to find one with like an island symbol on it and stars over it that tells her where to go.
Okay, look, again,
so
fictional kids movie. We have to like let them have that. It's okay.
So that island is called Motu Fetu.
Yeah.
And apparently all the people were separated millennia ago due to Nalo's sinking of Motu Fetu and its channels.
Yeah.
Along with Maui's theft of Te Fiti's heart, which made the oceans too dangerous to travel. So when they sunk the island that connected everybody and made the ocean too dangerous to travel, it basically separated everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
at the end of Moana 2, so this is like a bit of a spoiler if you haven't seen it or won't see it, but the meeting of different wayfinders from other villagers it implies that the long pause has come to an end and now the ocean is safer to travel. Because at the very end, when they bring Motofetu up from the ocean, they reconnected all of the people in all of the islands.
So just a little more. We're going to talk about the long pause in segment 3 here, but just a little bit more here. The movies are mostly spoken in English, but they use some Polynesian languages spoken some of the time, and you can hear that. They just like, it's like, I think it's kind of funny the way they do it. It's like when you have a speaker who is speaking English, but their native language is something else. And when they go to like get really mad or they go to something, they just devolve into they come down into their native language. Yes. You hear that a lot in this, actually.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. It's so good. Yeah. In the first Moana movie, the song We Know the Way features Samoan, Tokelauan, and Tuvaluan words.
Yep. Maui and Moana both perform hakas in both Moana movies, and that's a traditional Maori dance.
Yeah. So it's great. They've got the language, they got the dance, they got the mythology. They really did a great job with these movies. Again, really can't recommend them more. They're super fun.
All right. So on the other side, we'll talk a little bit more about the long pause and what that is, because it's a pretty cool point in history and how we think they may have overcome it. So back in a minute.
An O'Reilly Auto Parts gift card is the perfect gift for that hard-to-buy-for person. Give the gift of convenience from O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Welcome back to the Archaeology Show, episode 290, and now we're going to talk about the long pause. So before we get to the long pause, about 3,500 years ago, a group of people that we now know as the Lapita left the Bismarck Islands and entered the ocean. And the Bismarck Islands are kind of over
like far west,
New Zealand.
Right?
Yeah. They're over in that area. Interestingly enough, I just read an article yesterday about, what are they calling it? Zealandia, I think. But they think they've mapped what they're calling the 8th continent of the world. And when the Gondwana land broke up, which was, I think, pre-Pangea even. I can't remember what the sequence of events is here, but basically they're kind of surprised that Antarctica and Australia didn't just sink into the ocean, because this 8th continent did. And it's this huge landmass that's in the South Pacific. And the only thing that's sticking above the water that's part of that landmass is New Zealand. And it's part of, and they've mapped almost the entire thing. And it's a gigantic continent sitting underneath the South Pacific Ocean.
Where the hell is Maui with his fish hook?
I tell you.
Get a move on, bro.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I kind of wonder, I mean, they've mapped almost the whole thing, and they didn't mention any of the other islands in the South Pacific. I think those are all still like volcanically created.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think they're part of this whole Zealandia thing they're calling it. It's interesting that...
Zealandia.
Yeah.
That's the best thing ever.
I know. They're saying this thing sunk or was submerged. I think it actually did sunk because of subduction plates and things like it did sink, whatever, because of about 80 million years ago or something like that.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
But somehow New Zealand, maybe that was just like a super tall mountain, because New Zealand is really mountainous.
Yes. Hello, Lord of the Rings.
I know. Can you imagine how tall those would have been when that continent was not like...
Oh my God, crazy.
It's insane. Anyway, so these people left about, well, after that happened, 3,500 years ago.
Right.
Within 500 years, they developed the technology to just go island hopping through Melanesia and into Western Polynesia.
And they eventually reached and settled Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga. Yeah.
After this period of rapid exploration, and rapid in historical times is 500 years.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Something changed, and it would be another 1,000 years before people went further east to Hawaii, Rapa Nui, which is the indigenous name for Easter Island, and Aotearoa.
Yeah. And the question is, and still remains, why was there such a long pause between these two migrations? Analysis and carbon dating on artifacts found throughout the Pacific Islands have created a timeline of human migration.
Yeah. Western Polynesia was settled by about 800 BC. And computer models of wind direction and ocean currents suggest these changed enough to possibly be a reason for the gap. So that's one thing.
So they're overcoming a changing ocean, basically.
Yeah, it was well, they couldn't overcome it basically for 1,000 years.
They needed to learn how to overcome it, and it took a long time. Yeah,
it wasn't favorable for them to be sailing that direction.
Which kind of corresponds to the Polynesian myth of like the angry ocean. Yeah. Because it would seem angry to them when they couldn't get past whatever direction they were trying to go.
It actually fits the Moana 1 theory too, and Castaway and every other thing about any small island in the South Pacific where they always talk about getting past the reef.
Yeah.
Because there's always some kind of a reef out there.
Yeah.
And that's where the water breaks. And it's nice and calm on the inside. And then you have these huge ass waves that you've got to get over.
Yep.
And if you don't have the technology to get over that, and then once you get over that, you're just in the ocean. And if you don't have the boats to be able to handle, 6 to 9 foot swells on a regular day, and then angry swells on a bad day, you're going to die. It's
not even just the boats too. It's the skills. You have to have the skill to get over that too. So like you're kind of developing these two things at the same time to make that happen. On a side note, if anybody ever watches any of like the sailboat YouTubers, you can see them handling this. Like there's one that we like a lot called The Winds. We might have talked about them on here before, but they've been to Tonga and I think Fiji too. And like a lot of the drama in their like YouTube episodes is about getting in and out of the reefs and doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
So another reason for the long pause is that some researchers think that the seafaring technology just took too long to change.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we were just talking about. Like they just took them too long to get the bigger boats that they would have needed to navigate this changing ocean. And it just took time to develop all that. Yeah.
So as I mentioned earlier, the first sort of things that they used, the boats that they used were called outrigger canoes, the waka ama. Those were used for the earlier expeditions, the pre-long pause expeditions.
Yes.
And then the waka aurua, the double-hulled canoe, came later and could travel longer distances over rougher oceans and could also carry heavier loads. And I saw pictures associated with some of the articles that we've got linked here that really were inspiring the movie.
Yeah.
And some of you could see the older canoes when Moana goes into the cave to see the past wayfinders, right? Pre-long pause, because she's at the end of the long pause and doesn't know it.
Yeah.
So she's looking pre-long pause at her ancestors, at these old wayfarers. And I think they even say these were 1,000 years ago. I think they even mentioned
they might have even. That was in the first movie, right?
No, I think this was in the second. Oh, was that in the first movie? That was
in the first movie. You're right. When she's trying to go beyond the reef.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Finds that cave. Yeah. So there's those boats, and they were the older style, boats. And then later on, you do see, images of the bigger boats and and you see this in Polynesian history too.
Yeah, I mean they've got their like genius boat builder character who is the one that's creating these boats for them. But when all of the ships come together at the end of the movie because they've been released by pulling that island up, they're all different boats, but they're all big and they all have like that double canoe or double hull thing going on. So I feel like, again, the movie put a lot of time and effort into researching the different boat styles from different islands all across the Pacific and then representing those different boats as they were landing on the shore and all these people were integrating, which is just another really cool scene. Of course, it didn't happen like that in real life. Of course it didn't. Not a representative of every single island didn't roll up on this one island together in history. That couldn't have happened. But seeing it is just really cool in the movie. And it's another like fun fictional take that we really enjoyed.
Yeah, it was good.
So I had another thought too. And this isn't in your notes or anything, but do you think that the long pause could have just been the result of like not needing to grow or develop? Because,
getting comfortable.
Yeah. Like need drives technology, right?
Yeah.
And if these groups were happy with their current situation, they had enough food, they had enough resources, like maybe they just it didn't drive technology as quickly as it could have if they did need,
It's possible. I feel like technology and exploration are driven by two things. I feel like first off, they're always driven by hardship.
Yes.
Right? People like your population's either growing too much or you've run out your resources on whatever island you live on.
Right.
And you just need to move somewhere else. Right. That's going to either you're going to die like Easter Island, or you're going to move. Right. Something's going to happen. Or you just got people out there that are just naturally curious, like Moana. Moana, that's why she becomes this wayfinder. They kind of explore both situations because in Moana 2, they do talk about how their growing population and they need to find other islands. She's actively trying to search for other islands to find other people to move their people to other islands where people are and things like that. And I mean, she specifically mentions that in the beginning. And then also, she's just naturally inquisitive.
Right.
She wants to be an explorer.
She's an explorer. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And when Western seafaring technology and even Asian seafaring technology started to become more advanced and they got bigger ships and could take 100, 200 people, across the ocean, I mean, it just opened the world up because people were naturally explorers.
Yeah.
You know, you always have that one person or 15 people that want to go out and, you know, find stuff.
But exploring is dangerous, right? So like to be an explorer, you're inherently taking risk, and you have to be in a group or a population who supports you taking that risk too, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I guess I could, the complacency of a good life, I could see that sort of tampering that exploration spirit too, you know? I don't know. It's cool though. It's a period in prehistoric history that I think you and I just didn't know a whole lot about. Yeah. And I love learning about that, and from a kid's movie.
I know.
Who'd have thought?
I never thought Disney would inspire me to do anything, but you know,
right?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So.
Yeah. Well, I love a pop culture review, so hopefully nobody's mad that we spent time on a kid's movie and feel like they got something out of it.
Well, Disney does own ancient history now, because they've established that with Moana. They bought the Star Wars franchise, which is ancient history.
Don't they have the History Channel too? So like,
you just got to bypass
ancient aliens.
The fact that I called Star Wars ancient history.
Oh yeah, I'm okay with that. That's fine.
I was expecting a lot more than that. Anyway.
Well, I mean, like, you are who you are. You know?
Yeah. Long ago, far, far away.
Oh God. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, that's about that, I think.
Yep. All right. Well, hopefully. Oh, so speaking of long pause.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so perfect. Didn't even do this on purpose.
Yeah. So we decided on one of our APN business meetings, you know, people just kind of need a break sometimes, especially during the holidays. And we offered to a lot of our hosts the ability to basically kind of take a pause over between like December 15th and January 15th on their recordings. We're going to be running some encore episodes through some of our hosts took us up on that, and some did not. They're going to be running new episodes, right? So some shows are going to be having new episodes, some shows won't. I'm not really sure. We might have a combination because we have some more review shows we want to do. So this is a good moment to tell people that we're going to review the second season of Graham Hancock's show. I've blocked it out of my mind. It's so terrible. Ancient Apocalypse.
So we will rerun the first episode that we did for the first season sometime during this break. And if you're interested in following along with us, then watch that second season if you haven't yet. And then we'll talk about it.
That's a good idea. We'll run that as an encore episode. Yeah. And then the next episode, we'll play our review of it.
I'm not sure exactly, but you'll see the episode titles and see when it's coming. So that's definitely one of them. And then, you know, we'll see if we...
Maybe we should watch, because we're actually going on a cruise today with a whole bunch of our friends.
Yeah.
And maybe we should watch some episodes of Ancient Apocalypse with some non-archaeologists and see what they think about it and get their reactions. And
we could. We could. We definitely could. That would be fun.
I'm interested. All right. Well, with that, just want to let you guys know if we don't see you again, have a great holiday season, whatever you celebrate, and we will talk to you again in the new year.
Yes. Yep. We sure will.
Otherwise, yeah. All right. See you then. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Archaeology Show. Feel free to comment and view the show notes on the website at www.arcpodnet.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ArcPodNet. Music for this show is called I Wish You Would Look from the band Sea Hero. Again, thanks for listening and have an awesome day. The Archaeology Podcast Network is 10 years old this year. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy, our social media coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht, and our chief editor is Rachel Roden. The Archaeology Podcast Network was co-founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in 2014 and is part of Cultura Media and DigTech LLC.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.